here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Barbara Dickson. Now, I am extremely pleased because into the studio has come my guest for this week. I'm very pleased to tell you that it is the great Michael Marra, an old friend of mine and also one of the most original and wonderful artists in Scotland today. So that's a bit of a big build-up, Michael, but I mean every word of it. It's not
You're
rubbish.
Very kind.
It's only true. I'm telling you because it's true. Do you think that song sort of your life?
It would be fair to say that, yes. I mean, I respond to all kinds of music. Many different, completely different kinds of music. Yeah. But song itself, that represents the heights to me. A combination of the natural beauty of bird song and the human contribution to that, and the details and the telling of a story. Or not. It doesn't have to be that. I mean, that's at its best for me. There's always something of substance there.
Yes, substance is a very good word. I haven't actually written this in any of my notes, but that's what I think of when I think of you. Are you always looking for ideas? Do you soak up ideas like a sponge in the world around you?
Well, I pay attention, if that's what you mean. I do. It's a ritual every morning where I read the newspaper to try to see if there are any obvious songs jumping out of the newspapers. Remember a song by Bob Geldof, I Don't Like Mondays? Mm-hmm. Came directly from a newspaper of an actual account of an event in America, a horrible thing. And I used to feel that was my duty, to be looking for that kind of thing. Now, he responded perfectly to it and wrote the perfect song to go with it, I Don't Like Mondays. Now, every day I look for those, and occasionally I find the way into them. Either the subject itself or a good and original way into a subject that I've been trying to write about.
I had a friend only say to me last week that he got slightly annoyed, which I didn't agree with at all, about the Chris Wood song about the Brazilian boy who was shot by Menezes in London. And he said that he didn't think he had the right to sing that song because he wasn't there and he was kind of commenting on it. And I didn't agree with that. And you've just said that, you think it's your duty to comment on the world around you.
I do. And I would point out that Chris Woods is actually a great champion of that noble idea.
I agree entirely.
There is nothing about which you shouldn't write. That's why we're here. I had a gig recently with Chris Wood and Karine Polwart at King's Place in London. And his performance, I didn't know his stuff. I didn't know much about him.
Yes, it's a wonderful song, that song, isn't it?
It is, aye. He has every right.
Yes, I agree. I agree entirely. And that's interesting. Can you remember vaguely, or maybe you remember distinctly, the first real song you ever wrote?
I regard the first one as one which I sang in front of my family, in front of my aunties. I mean, you don't get any more serious business than that. And I was quite young. But I was very young when I decided to be a songwriter. I was very young indeed. In fact, I didn't ever want to be anything else. Once I'd got over the football, I wouldn't be playing for Dundee. So.
A bitter blow.
No, but I didn't want anything else. And I wrote a song called Much Too Hard to Find. It was about a young guy who fell for a young girl of dubious virtue. And my mother had to explain this to my aunties, and my aunties just kept giggling. But I took a deep breath and sang it, and it worked. It had worked.
And you got it across to them. They understood what you were on about.
Yes, I closed my eyes and sang. And
communicated it.
I hope so. Yes.
Well, you obviously did. How do you feel when other people sing your songs? Now, I'm not fishing for compliments here because I am not including myself in this illustrious group of people who have indeed taken on your wonderful songs. Do you like it? Does it matter to you? Are you bothered?
Oh, it matters. It does. I love it, actually. And I was very grateful for the ones that you did. You did beautifully.
Thank you, Michael.
The very first one that I got was Frankie Miller recorded a song called The Fight. I unfortunately don't have a copy of that now. I'd quite like that for my portfolio, because it was very exciting hearing somebody else doing my stuff. And he was the first major one.
And he was great, Frankie Miller. I liked him doing Caledonia as well.
Oh, yeah, he did a
Wasn't
great
that
job
great?
there.
Yeah, he was fantastic. So you don't have to be a songwriter, do you, to be able to get your teeth into a song? I always stick up for people who don't write songs and say it's just as important to be an interpreter to some extent.
Aye, there are some great ones about.
When you were a child, did music play a big part in your life, you know, when you were a wee boy?
Yes, it did. My parents both loved music. My dad was a big Duke Ellington fan. Ellington was God in our house. Ellington and Beethoven and Louis Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, and great jazz stuff. And my mother sang, and my mother's family were all singers.
What did they sing? What sort of music?
Well, but all four of my grandparents come from Ireland, so it was the folk music that I heard, Irish songs, you know, the classic stuff, Kathleen and all that.
Yes, yes.
And my uncles were actually of an age where they had been more affected by the American stuff.
Yes.
Like there's one of my uncles, Wally Wilkinson, and I wish I had a video of him performing Temptation. That was his piece, you know, at a party when the family got together.
Very dramatic song.
Oh, I tell you.
Yes.
I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you had it now and you put it on YouTube, Wally Wilkinson would have fans the world over. They were all very good performers, and the family definitely had a big thing about you having to perform when they got together.
So there was a party piece, basically.
Yes.
It was a party piece mentality. I recall the same thing, actually, in my own family. Did this go laterally into school? Did you play in school? Was there any musical encouragement of any sort in school that you were interested in?
Well, not really. Not in the official stuff, although we did do the hymns for church. We did them in the school. To this day, I have a lot of great favourites of wonderful tunes, and I was in the Altar Boys.
That's why you're so well behaved.
Well, I made a chorus for a song called The Altar Boys. Deum quili tificat, juven tutam meam. Any old altar boy will find that familiar.
Yes, of course.
I used quite a lot of that.
How interesting. So there's a very rich kind of cultural stuff and going on and music from the family. But when we think of you musically, too many people represent Dundee. What does Dundee mean to you, and why is it such a rich seam to mine in songs?
Well, I moved into that area by accident. I was working in the music business in London, as you know.
Yes.
We worked together. Now, when I made my second record for Polydor Records, they weren't keen on it. It was a lot of blues stuff, and I tried to get the producer Joe Boyd. That was what I wanted. I wanted to work with him. He left the music business, so I consequently came back to Dundee, and I wrote one song called General Grant's Visit to Dundee.
I remember it well.
Well, when I sent that to a publisher in London, he wondered what he was supposed to do with it. And it was, I actually felt a wee bit insulted by that, and began to deliberately push towards that end, and found myself, well, I made an album called Gale's Blue, and it was 10 songs on Scottish subjects, which was an unusual thing for somebody like me to do. Gale's
Blue, which was the most fantastic album, came out of that, but it really is, it wasn't a deliberate thing, is what you're saying? That
not to begin with. Actually, the song itself, the General Grant song, was influenced by Randy Newman's record, Good Old Boys.
Yes, I know that. Which
was an album with a theme which he carried through it. Now that did interest me, so that affected it powerfully. But I didn't want to change the kind of music which I used. because I was using Scottish subjects, I didn't want any Scottish cliche type music whatsoever, or fake folk music. I wanted to make things that stood up on their own, with me doing them in the way that I did.
And the lyrics, of course, people associate you with lyrics serious as well as very humorous and wry lyrics, and your personality. How important are the lyrics to you?
It's everything, really. Usually first there's an idea, and then there's a bit of a scuffle and an argument inside about whether the idea merits the amount of slog that you have to put into working out all the different options and how you're going to say something. Would you be saying it any better than anybody else has before? Or does it come in from an interesting angle? There's all kind of things that I think about. But if it is a good idea, I'll probably get on with it, and I'll do 3 drafts. The first one will have a number of things wrong with it. Second one will have 1 or 2 things wrong with it. And hopefully the last one is correct.
And will those 3 drafts have been done in fairly quick succession? Or would you put something away and come back to it?
No, they'll be done very quickly.
Right,
When I finish
I'm
the first
interested
one,
in that,
because
yes.
I think that then the faults in it on the first draft, they're obvious.
Yes, okay.
They jump out and make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you fix them before anybody else hears it.
Yeah, well, very wise. Michael, you have a great talent for taking a small subject. I don't mean a person here, but it's very often a person. And then you make them blossom in your songs. You just watch them fly by nurturing them in your songs. Is this deliberate?
You're right, actually. I've done quite a number of those. I actually approve of the concept of heroes. I do think that that heroes are good for people, and I personally like to celebrate like sportsmen or musicians or artists especially, in a way that it was military people who were in their place before.
And now it's celebrities.
Now, well, I wouldn't use that word, because I don't think of the real heroes.
No,
or I wouldn't use that word about them.
No.
And real heroes are quite often completely unknown people.
Yes, you can have a hero. Yes, and you have, because a lot of the songs I can think of are very interesting sort of portraits of people you know. You do specific works for the theatre and also so-called serious music, you know, with classical musicians. Do you enjoy the challenge of having to do projects which are different to songwriting and performing on your own?
I do. And the theatre was a pretty natural way to bridge that. The theatre, one of the very few people who will employ songwriters for a start. And it had been good to me. And the discipline of writing for the theatre is just wonderful. It's every writer should go through it.
I was wondering if it was rather, you know, if you became panic-stricken, not you particularly, but I was thinking there must be lots of deadlines in that work.
Yes, but if a director says to you, we need it by Friday, well, you're not going to turn up on Friday and say, no, I have not been able to do my job.
Done it.
There's a big challenge involved.
Yes.
That, well, I like to respond to it by aiming as high as possible to, you know, like, right, I'll show them what, you know, it's only a couple of days.
Do you enjoy acting? Because I know you act very well. I've heard a very wonderful radio production you did. Do you like acting, Michael? Because when I met you, I didn't know that you would become an actor.
I was actually kind of thrown into it through working in the theatre, writing music for the theatre.
Yes.
And then when I worked with people like Jerry Mulgrew with Communicado, or with Davey Anderson at Wildcat, you were expected to be able to not only write, but to sing and dance and act.
It wasn't a deal.
Well, it came as a surprise to me, and I was asked to do something, and the way I looked at it was I was working with good actors, Now, I paid close attention and I asked questions and I learned how not to spoil any scene.
And how to, you kept your eyes open. That's kind of what I learned as well. But when I did Blood Brothers, much the same.
I remember that. You
Fabulous
were working with
people who...
George Costigan.
Yeah, George Costigan,
The kind of things you can learn from people like that.
Just watch them.
I worked with John Buick at Dundee and just, learned very quickly.
Yes.
And a certain amount of that was because of panic. Yeah. But it was very informative.
Do you know what word I wrote after I said to you, I've written a note here, do you enjoy acting? And I have written the word nerve-wracking. I must have, because I found acting to begin with absolutely terrifying.
What?
On all sorts of levels, because it's not, you haven't got the piano, you haven't got a guitar there. I was used to standing behind instruments and stuff. And
nothing to hang on to.
Nothing, no.
I did a production of Liz Loch's Tartuffe.
Yes, that's a great show.
I played 3 different parts in that, and that was just purely acting, nothing else, no music. And again, with a great group of actors, but I was frightened to death. Absolutely frightened to death.
Well, I know that feeling, so I can really sympathise. You know, I would not be glibly saying, oh, well, you've got nothing to worry about, because I know what that feels like. Michael, it has just been such a pleasure to talk to you and to talk to you about your work and your attitudes to life and your work. And it's been lovely to talk to you. And we're going to go out with Pius Porteous.
Lovely. Thank you for having me. There's nothing like a moonlit night. Clean shirt and whiskers and eyes that are bright. Pius takes his heels to flight. Out in the cornfield, you'll see her again when the moon comes out.